All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the third part of the show, we are going to talk about the playoff teams that were the most disappointing. Um, and I'll just give you my thoughts on them. So, yeah, we got one game left, but I just wanted to revisit, some of the, well, pretty much all of the past playoff teams. But some of them are more disappointing than others. Obviously, I'm not disappointed in the Commanders. I mean, I guess maybe you could be disappointed in the Bills because they weren't able to knock off the Chiefs. Um, but we'll start off with we'll start from the beginning, the wild card round, and then work our way back. So I would say that really the teams that were the most disappointing were all the teams that were in the NFC North. I mean, this division was looked at as the best division in football all year because you had three teams that made the playoffs. Two of them were playing against each other for the division, for the one seed. And you just thought that this division was going to maybe run the playoffs. And that just did not happen. With those three teams, how many playoff wins did they have combined? Zero. Zero. And I think the most disappointing, I would say it's the Lions. Just because you had a bye, you were the one seed, you had home field advantage, and you let the Commanders walk up and down the field all over you. And on top of that, they had 5 turnovers in the game? It was a fumble by Jared Goff, 3 interceptions. Jameson Williams threw an interception, which they should not have been running that play at that point in the game against the Commanders. That was bad. That was bad. And on top of that, I don't think the Commanders punted until the fourth quarter. Jane Daniels and that offense had their way against the Lions. And, now they go into an offseason where they've lost both coordinators. It's going to be interesting how the Lions bounce back from this. But you thought a bye week would help them. And you could also point to, Jared Goff getting banged up in that game, taking that hit from Frankie Louvu on the pick six. He could have been playing with a concussion. And that's why maybe, the turnovers continued. But, yeah, it was an overall a mess of a game for the Lions. The Vikings, they were never in their game. They weren't. Like, at least with the Lions, the game went back and forth for a little bit, and then the Commanders took a commanding lead. I know I had to say that. That was a bad joke. But the Vikings, from start to finish in their game against the Rams, they never had a chance. Sam Darnold got sacked all over the place. The Rams had that impressive drive to open the game. There was never a point in that game where you thought, yeah, the Vikings got a shot. No. And this was coming off of that disappointing end to the regular season where, that game was close against the Lions, but then the Lions kind of pulled away. This game, it was pure domination. And it was a sour end to a very good season. Kevin O'Connell, he might be winning Coach of the Year. But, and also Sam Darnold, the year that he had. Now all of a sudden it's like, well, are the Vikings going to bring him back as their quarterback? Like, what's going to happen there? Because these two games were true tests for Sam Darnold. And he did not deliver in either of them. He didn't. So now, what's going to happen there? We'll have to wait and see. And then also talking about the Packers. Now, their defense kept them in the game against the Eagles. Like, if you look at the 3 games that the Eagles have played. Now, Saquon Barkley has had over 100 yards in each one. But the Packers, until like the very end of the game, but, that was just to ice the game. The Packers did a good job at keeping themselves in the game. The problem is the offense could not generate any kind of momentum. Jordan Love had a disappointing day with the interceptions. I mean, really the only one that showed up on offense was Josh Jacobs. Josh Jacobs was, Josh Jacobs had that hard run, that set up a touchdown on the next play. Their offense really just couldn't get anything on. But that's a credit to the Eagles' defense also, because the Eagles' defense is really good. But the Packers, I mean, this was a year that, I mean, I had high expectations for them based off of how Jordan Love finished out the season last year. And I was hoping for, a step up. Now, Jordan Love wasn't entirely healthy because he dealt with numerous injuries throughout the year. And he was a little banged up in this, in that game too. So let's see what happens in year 3. Now being, the starting quarterback for the 3rd straight year. And the Packers, they have invested a lot in him. So he's got to deliver. But the Packers, they need to add to the offense, because going into the year, you thought, all right, they're going to be okay because, they're like, we don't need a number 1 wide receiver because all these guys are equally talented and, well, maybe not equally talented, but they're all talented and we're going to spread the ball around. But they don't have that alpha receiver. We thought it was going to be Jaden Reed. I thought it was going to be Christian Watson because when Christian Watson's healthy, I think he's the best receiver on the team, but can't stay healthy. Romeo Doubs got banged up this year. It's just they need another wide receiver on that team. They need a true number 1 because that'll only make these receivers better. You got Josh Jacobs, who had a great year, and I think Jordan Love, this was just a down year. I think he'll bounce back, but they were pretty disappointing because I think if you have, and it didn't get off to a great start either because they fumbled the kickoff, even though you could see that Keyshawn Nixon looked like he recovered it, and the Eagles were up 7-0, in an eye blink. And if that doesn't happen, maybe the game plays out differently. But if the Packers were able to generate an offense in that game, they could have won it. They definitely could have won that game. That game was in reach. But they were disappointing. I mean, I guess when you look at the Steelers, they had a disappointing end to their season, but I think we all kind of knew that, when they had this late season collapse, going into Baltimore again, I mean, they weren't going to win the game. They weren't. The odds were stacked against them. The Ravens are a better overall team. The better team won. And the Steelers' offense was lethargic in the first half. And, in the second half, Russell Wilson made a couple of good throws and, they had a couple of scores late, but they never had a chance in that game. The Broncos got blown out by the Bills. I mean, I guess you could say it was a disappointment because, I expected there to be a little bit more fight from them. I mean, the game started out great. I mean, Bo Nix hits Troy Franklin for that touchdown on the first drive of the game, and you're thinking, here we go. And then the Bills just took over from there. I mean, for me, I just think the NFC North teams were the most disappointing. I'm trying to think of who else. I mean, the Commanders-Buccaneers game, I mean, that turnover by Baker Mayfield was a huge difference. I mean, he had a great year. But, like I said, I look at the NFC North teams. And then, actually, when we go into the divisional round, I mean, the Rams, they were in until the end. It looked like it was over after Barkley scored a second touchdown, but, the Rams had an opportunity to win that game at the very end. And I'm in agreement with people. If the weather didn't get as bad as it did, I think the Rams win that game. I really do believe that. But we'll never know. I think it's the Ravens. They were the biggest disappointment of the divisional round. They were. I forgot I didn't even talk about Chargers Texans. I mean, I guess Justin Herbert as an individual, that was a disappointing performance, but how that game played out, I look at it and I'm like, what, the Chargers, their flaws got exposed in the game. And I didn't expect the Texans to walk into Kansas City and beat the Chiefs. But back to the Ravens, that would be another disappointment. I mean, whoever lost that game, like if the Ravens won that game, then I'd be saying the Bills were a disappointment. But they didn't. The Ravens ended up losing. They were the disappointment. Lamar Jackson, 2 turnovers in the first half. One of them really made a difference because that led to points for Buffalo. And then you had, Lamar play a much better second half, but then Mark Andrews, he has that fumble that leads to points, and then you have the drop on the 2-point conversion. Can't happen. And the Ravens are a team that consistently makes the playoffs every year. And, this is another early playoff exit for him. Or was an early playoff exit for him. And, yeah, it's just, you were thinking maybe this was the year. Saying the same thing about Buffalo, too. But they were definitely a letdown. Again, you could make you could say the Bills were a letdown, but, I mean, Josh Allen and that offense, they played a good enough game where they could have won. But they didn't. Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs made more plays than them in big moments. So, yeah, that's my thoughts on the playoff letdowns. Let me know what you guys think. What team was the biggest letdown in the postseason this year? Let me know in the comments. So we are going to take our next break, and then when we come back, we'll actually talk about the New Orleans Saints. Now we're going to talk about the Saints and their head coaching situation, because they are the only team that has not hired a head coach yet, and we'll talk about where that's kind of at the moment. So with that being said, stick around. And we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.